governance to me, the pathways between now and 2073, there are kind of three major pathways that we might follow. And then I'll share which one I think that is most likely to emerge, or in, I guess, probably better to say reemerge. One pathway is we just kind of continue the national government paradigms that have existed since 1900 or so, um, and with kind of, let's call it rudimentary UN-based global cooperative governance projects. Not really governance per se, but governments coming together to do things somewhat cooperatively. There is a trend in the world right now, and this is quite clear. It's been going on for about 15 years or so. It's at a fever pitch here in the U.S. and around the world, and that is toward a sort of a reigniting of ultra nationalism. And people, it could be captured in a slogan on a hat. It could be captured in withdrawing from the European Union. There are various ways in which this sort of manifests itself, and the mantra is basically enough of this whole world stuff. Let's take care of ourselves. Let's isolate to the extent we can ourselves from the world. In the U.S., we might call it, let's bring all of the manufacturing back, and let's just become more hyper-nationalistic. You can see it in Russia. You can see it in other places. And that's clearly a phenomenon that's been going on for some time. My opinion is that that's a negative phenomenon and is a threat to a positive future for most of the people on the planet. And so the third possibility is that we sort of reassert. It was a kind of a philosophical shift that happened in the 1980s, especially, but it had begun a little bit earlier. But it's particularly in the 1980s, and that was a belief that if not a creation of global governance, then a sort of mental shift that would happen, a mind shift, if you will, in which people would begin to consider themselves part of a global society, in addition to being part of a national and local community. And the trend right now is to push back against that. But I think that is likely to reemerge because the problems that we face, primarily climate change, and to some extent the prevention of war, just require global responses. And so I think we're sort of in, my opinion is that hope is that we're in this kind of hiccup period, and we'll play around in this sort of hyper-nationalistic world again. We'll discover it has more negative outcomes than positive, and a kind of a sense of global citizenship will reassert itself. Years ago, I interviewed an author named Peter Russell. He had written a book. Let me hold it up. It was called The Global Brain. He actually wrote the original version of this book in 1983. This is a more recent edition, the most recent edition, reprinted in 2018, although the edition is from 2007. And Peter Russell is a British, although he lives in California now, based physicist, science writer, and he kind of looked at evolutionary history and said when systems reach a sufficient level of complexity, they tend to transition to a higher level of complexity and a higher level of function, a higher level of intelligence, if you will. And his thesis in 1983 was electronic communication systems as they existed then, which were very rudimentary compared to what we have now, were in the process, along with airplane travel, of linking up everybody in the world in a way that had never existed before. And that if you think of human beings, each human being as equivalent of a neuron in a brain, that we're reaching a sufficient level of complexity in terms of the number of human neurons on the planet, now all connected via electronic communication and travel, that we could leap to a higher level of consciousness. That's a little bit esoteric, of course, But in terms of governance, the case he made was that that's necessary for us to achieve a kind of global society. We have to make it's not so much creating a new government structure as it is to making a mental shift in how we see ourselves as part of a whole community of human beings on planet Earth, and then perhaps planet Earth as part of a larger solar system society, and so on. And the next 50 years, I think, will be quite impactful in terms of whether we make that shift. One could argue, perhaps, that if we don't make that shift, we don't get through the next 50 years, or we're in a world of hurt 50 years from now and just trying to dig ourselves out of crisis after crisis after crisis. If we do make that mental shift, then I think we can have a world which works better for everybody, as Buckminster would have said, Buckminster Fuller.